My own personal view, if you ask me, is that I prefer to think of globalization as a project, perhaps even as a campaign in the way that one thinks of campaign in 1984 or Animal Farm. Uh, and I think when historians, say 1 or 2 generations from now, the more sober, the more thinking historians look back at globalization, the kind of questions they're going to ask is how did this period of, say, 30 years from about the late 1980s manage to foster subjectivities that made a concept like globalization seem natural? And then what are the implications for the real world of that period of the subjectivities materializing? I think it's a very good question, also because, in one sense, it enables me to add to what I just said before, which is that the idea that we are globalizing has always been there. And the new feature of the last 30 years is that it's become something of a mania in a way that was not there before. And before, people were naturally embracing the world, expanding into the world, letting the world into their lives, and in ways that involve playing with multiple identities, multiple influences, and so on. And this has been a process that's been going on for as long as human societies have existed. Now, has this improved? Has intercultural understanding improved in the last 30 or 40 years? I'm not so sure. Has it improved in the last 200 years? I'm less sure that it has. Because I have, as historians, we all know that identities are much more fluid, ideas of freedom were, in fact, much more nuanced. Then, paradoxically enough, in the wake of the Enlightenment beginning to spread its wings over Europe with all the consequences that followed. So I would kind of say a qualified yes rather than simply a yes or no. Again, speaking as a historian, we should probably avoid thinking that the present, is somehow very much more advanced than the past in some of these respects. Flows have grown in speed and intensity, but so too has resistance to these flows. And we don't know what the outcomes are. But again, for as long as human societies have existed, humans have absorbed and, given cultures and practices to one another. I mean, I'll just give you one example. India is supposed to be very conservative, very stagnant society, Asia in general. But if you look at Asian cuisines, Southeast Asia, South India, even the most orthodox cuisines in South India, and consider all the ways in which New World foods have been fused into their cuisines rather than kept modularly distinct, then you see the extent to which these so-called stagnant conservative societies have actually made more meanings from flows of this nature and interpreted them into their lives than you would expect from, say, the vantage point of a dynamic society like Europe. Whereas, in fact, in dynamic societies like Europe, resistance to these flows have probably been much deeper for much longer than in societies like Asia.